In this video, I wanted to take the opportunity to give you some information about the old Defender because they have drastically increased in popularity lately, and I think they aren't for everyone. They're for a certain type of person. If you are that certain type of person, then you should absolutely buy an old Defender. It is an amazing car. But if you aren't, you will bloody hate the old Defender. The information I am about to give you comes from a lot of experience. I have driven a lot of Defenders. I have worked on Defenders. I have this old Discovery, which is essentially the same car underneath. It is the same engine, the same chassis, the same axles, the same suspension. It is just a bit more comfortable than the old Defender. So I have plenty of information to give you here. Now, the problem is that old 4x4s have kind of become romantic lately. A lot of people love the idea of owning an old 4x4 because it makes them look cool. An old Defender, I believe, is one of the prettiest cars ever made. It looks at home in the middle of nowhere or in the middle of a big city, and I think very few cars manage to do that. So the appeal of the old Defender is the cool factor, is the image of the old Defender. And this is the problem because many people recently tend to buy Defenders just to drive them around town so they can look good in them. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but where the problem lies is when people buy the old Defender imagining that it will drive like any other normal 4x4 or any other normal vehicle. This is where people tend to get disappointed. Again, there is nothing wrong with driving an old Defender on the road. If you want to take care of it, then by all means go ahead and do so. However, be very careful before putting your money into an old Defender, because as soon as you drive one, you realize quickly that it is a compromised vehicle. And what I mean by this is that there isn't a lot of space in the cabin. Your right arm or your left arm, depending on where the steering wheel is, doesn't have much space. So in a right-hand Defender, you kind of drive like this unless you can open up the window and have your arm outside the car. But if you have the windows closed, you will kind of be like this, and you will drive with either this hand, kind of like this, and rest the other hand on the armrest, or with this hand and find a spot to put your right arm into. It isn't the most comfortable car for sure. The gear shifts aren't the smoothest. The transfer box and the running gear can be a bit noisy. They have a gear-driven transfer box, which is one of the best transfer boxes ever made, but it is a heavy-duty thing and it tends to be clunky and noisy. It is made for work, so it tends to be a bit more compromised on road. The cabin of stock Defender is noisy. There is hardly any insulation. It is a big aluminum box that is bolted on a huge ladder chassis with heavy solid axles, so don't expect it to be civilized. That being said, I believe the ride quality of the old Defender and old Land Rovers in general is actually very good for what type of 4x4 they are. They are coil sprung solid axles, so they aren't leaf springs, which makes them ride much nicer. But if you're coming from a normal car and have never driven Land Rover before, you will certainly be entertained, either in the good way or in the bad way. Also keep in mind that the clutch is very heavy, so if you're going to the gym, you will be able to save some money and cancel your subscription, because every time you get stuck in traffic, it will be leg day. All jokes aside, I'm not trying to put you off from buying an old Defender here. I'm just trying to give you some information you should know, because many people don't expect these kind of things when going into an old Defender. That being said, if you are the type of person who loves mechanical stuff, or of course if you have owned Land Rovers before and know how Land Rovers are, then by all means go and buy an old Defender. For example, myself, I love these old vehicles. I get immense pleasure from driving these old vehicles. So I don't actually find them uncomfortable at all. I can do a lot of miles in them, I can spend a lot of hours in them, and I will get out smiling. I know the compromises. I am well aware that if I put a normal person in the Discovery or in a Defender, they will most probably find it a bit weird. Why am I driving this old car all day long? But my mind works in a different way, and I enjoy these old cars a lot. So if you're the type of person who loves this kind of stuff, who loves the simple cars, then the old Defender will be a pleasure. Also keep in mind that the old Defender and every other old Land Rover will be able to put to shame most other 4x4s when it comes to off-roading. These things are amazing. With a few modifications like lockers and a bit more suspension travel, they will go absolutely everywhere. If a Land Rover can't go there, then the chances of any other car going there are very slim. Now, one last thing I wanted to mention is cost of ownership. It isn't as bad as you think it is. If you get a good example of an old Land Rover, especially if it is a 300 TDI or a 200 TDI, you won't need to do much work to it. They are reliable cars and they are very simple cars. If you get one that needs work, you will be spending most of your money on labor if you're paying someone to do the work for you. If you're doing the work yourself, then these are very affordable vehicles to keep going. Their parts are immensely cheap. I also have a Land Cruiser Prado and the parts for this are much cheaper, and working on the Land Rover is much easier. It doesn't need specialty tools or anything. It is very simple to work on and everything is straightforward. And YouTube is full of videos on how to fix these things, so if you don't know how to do something, there is a very good chance you will find a video on how to do it. If you get into a newer Defender like a TD5 or a Puma, you will have slightly higher costs of ownership, especially in the Puma. Those tend to have a few problems, but the TD5s can also be reliable if looked after correctly and if you know how to maintain them. They have a few things you need to look out for, but once you get those sorted, they are also very reliable cars and they are more usable and drivable than the old 300 TDIs because they have a bit more power. If you are going to do extreme off-roading like deep water crossings and a lot of mud and a lot of remote travel, then I would recommend going for a 300 TDI or a 200 TDI because they are very, very simple engines. These things can run underwater, literally. There are very few electronics on them. So that's about it. In a few simple words, don't go into a Defender expecting a normal car because it isn't. If you want to drive an old Defender, then you have to be in the mentality of an old Defender and an old Land Rover in general. It will be noisy, it won't be very comfortable, but if you enjoy it, then you will always be smiling and you won't want to get in any other car on the road, I promise you. If you are looking for something comfortable and completely trouble-free, then walk as far as possibly away from an old Defender because you will hate it. Remember, you need to be a certain type of person to like these cars, or to put it plainly, you might need to be a bit stupid to like these cars. In any case, thank you for watching the video and I'll see you on the next one.